Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Welcome to FM Live this week. My name is Jeremy, one of the guys here at Flyin Miata, and I'm kind of an audiophile, so we decided today to talk a little bit about car stereos in Miatas. You know, we've got these wonderful cars we love everything about. Obviously, we're all about performance here and all the other things. Personally, I'm also into audio performance. You know, I think I autocross the fastest when I have really good music playing. And you know, it's just something that helps to pump you up and give you focus and all these other things. And I just really like music. However, we've got some challenges in the Miata that we'll want to talk about and address today. We'll go through some things. We'll take some questions. As always, if you like what you're seeing today, you know, please like and subscribe so that we can hopefully give you more content in the future and you can be made aware of when we do. So this is my personal daily driver. Apologies, it's snowing here in Colorado today, so it's a little dirty and it is my daily. But it's a 95 popular equipment package. And when I got it like all the others, the sound was absolutely horrible. And that's just not going to work for me. So I spent a little bit of time thinking, okay, how can you maximize the amount of sound that you're achieving out of such a small package? Obviously, there's not a lot of space in here. But it can be done. You know, when I first put a turbo kit on an older Miata that I had, you know, I was able to put myself and my brother and a week's worth of camping gear, and we went to Yosemite for a week, you know, right after I put the turbo kit on. So, you know, believe it or not, you can actually stuff quite a bit in here if you're smart about it. So, you know, there is some space to put some decent stereo equipment in. Unfortunately, the stereo equipment these days has gotten to be, you can get pretty darn good stuff for really not a lot of money. I didn't spend very much on this really compared to, you know, 20 years ago when I was putting, you know, stereos in older cars that I had, you know, spending far more money to get, you know, this kind of a quality in the headroom that you need here. So, so what are some of the issues? The stock stereo on these cars is pretty horrendous. It's even worse than, you know, most cars because you don't have space for really any power and you got small speakers and they're just not good quality to begin with. You know, some of the cars like this one also have some little speakers in the headrest, which we'll talk about. Also, there are these just terrible little paper cone things that just fall apart for most people. And then of course you don't have much room to put any kind of a, you know, a low range speaker like a subwoofer or something because there's just not much space. And in my opinion, there's a couple things that you really need to address that are problems that are going to get you to having a really solid stereo system in any car. And one is you have to have full range, including a subwoofer. If you don't have a subwoofer, you're just kind of spinning your wheels. There's frequencies you just can't access. And I don't care what type of music you listen to, rock, rap, punk, whatever. Having that full range of frequency is going to give you a much better experience. And it's also going to allow you to have more headroom because you can cross over your speakers appropriately. And the other thing is you need headroom, especially in a car like a Miata that has a soft top where a lot of those sound frequencies are just escaping out through the soft top, even though it's a small space. When you have these soft top cars, as you know, on the highway, they're very, very noisy and you get a lot of road noise in. And so you need extra volume to overcome that road noise and get a good listening experience. And you're not going to get that without a lot of headroom. And in order to get headroom, you need amplifiers. You know, you can't just run off of a head unit. So that creates a lot of challenges as how can you fit all of those things into this little bitty space? And it can be done. I'll say the setup that I ended up with in this car, not tremendously expensive and very effective. I can have, you know, any volume level that's safe for your ears and nice, clear audio quality on the highway with the road noise. Just not an issue. As with a stock stereo, I don't even bother turning it on the highway. It's just a complete waste of time, in my opinion. So let's see. What are some other things that can help? You know, a hard top obviously is going to help because it's going to capture that in. It's especially the lower frequencies. It's also going to help capture them. But actually how I have it set up here, it's really kind of a non-issue as long as you keep the trunk closed. And I'll show you why in a little bit. How do you go about picking a good one? I'll show you what I have in here, which, you know, I like it. I'll tell you what I did. I'll tell you if I were to do it again, there's a couple things I would do differently. Realistically, we've gotten to the point where most of the decent, you know, name brand stuff that you can find on the market is really pretty good. And to be honest, you know, I'm not going to some fancy shop and listening to 12 different varieties to try to find my favorite. All that would have been nice. It's just not something that we have here. I was able to leverage Crutchfield to get all the stuff for this car. They have excellent customer service. They have everything you could want. All their instructions, everything is super top notch. So that's a really great place in general. No affiliation, just, you know, a happy customer to get all of your things. So, gosh, I'm rambling a little bit. Let's start by showing you what I got, and then we can get into some questions. And then if you like it, you're welcome to take some notes. So what are we doing? The first thing that everyone thinks about is, okay, you have to have a head unit. You know, the factory head unit is junk, right? That's got to go. The important thing for me is, and this is not expensive these days. I've got this Pioneer head unit. I think it was 150 bucks, something like that, not expensive. But the important part for me is I wanted something that had Bluetooth, because as with most people now, you know, I stream most of the stuff off my phone, whether it's, you know, radio, music, podcasts, you know, anything like that, I'm streaming it off my phone. So I really just wanted something with Bluetooth, and it still happens to have a CD player. But, you know, that's up to you. What does that look like? I will say that in the NA and the NB, I did look at the possibility of getting one of the big screened things like you can fit in an NC, but when I did the measurements, my knuckles would have been hitting the screen when I put it into third gear. And so I'm like, well, that's not going to work. So I did end up just going with, you know, your traditional single DIN, and it's reliable, it's effective, and it's inexpensive. So now, of course, all of these head units are going to have some sort of built-in, you know, power amplifier. But honestly, it's completely insufficient. If you really want to have a system with headroom where you can get good, clear volume and note separation up to higher levels that are usable on the highway with the convertible, you absolutely have to have amplifiers in the car. Fortunately, with the technology of amplifiers, they're also getting very cheap and getting very small. So I was able to find a nice 2-channel amplifier that actually fits really nicely behind the seat. That 2-channel amplifier is powering my door speakers, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. This is one place where if I were to do it over again, I would have tried to find an equally small footprint 4-channel amplifier, simply because currently I do still have the head unit running the headrest speakers, which in hindsight, I wish I wouldn't have done that. I wish I would have just carved out a little bit more space for a 4-channel so that I could also have that running the headrest speakers. But, you know, you live and learn. The headrest speakers do add a lot, and it's not that they add a lot of volume, because your head's right here. You don't want them to add a lot of volume. What they do is they add space, and they just make things a little bit more wide. They make the experience a little bit more immersive. So it is also valuable to replace these with something that's decent. And like I said, if I had to do it over again, I'd put an amp on those. And I'll show you more about those here in a minute. But first, let's keep talking about the amplifier. Back here, there's actually just enough space to hide. And another thing that I'll mention is, you know, personally, I'm a big fan of not advertising things that I have in my car. So, you know, I don't want setups where people can walk by the car and see them, just because it's a convertible. You know, it's too easy to break into. So I got this Pioneer solid state. It's a 2-channel, 500 watt amp. And it actually fits really nicely, you know, right here under the carpet next to the car's ECU. And this is powering the door speakers, and it's plenty of headroom in a very small package to give the door speakers all of, you know, the clarity and headroom that they need. So solves that issue. Now for the door speakers, in this car also, because I don't like to advertise, I do have, gosh, I forget the brand right now, but like I said, most of the brands that are making them are pretty good. I got some marine grade speakers because it's a convertible, and you know, what if it rains in here when I'm driving someday? I know, probably won't, but I did anyway. And I got these. This is one other place where if I had it to do again, I would probably do separates Originally, I didn't want to do separates because with the separates, you're going to have just, your mid here, you're going to have a separate tweeter, and you're going to have to cut a hole up here in your door card somewhere to fix the separate tweeter. And to me, that was a visual thing. However, in hindsight, I will say that would have been a better audio choice to have something with separates, for the reason that when you have a system, one of the key things that you're doing here is determining the crossover levels so that you can optimize the output from each driver. Because obviously, each driver is not full range. You've got your high-end drivers, your mid drivers, and then your low-end driver. And one of the downsides of having just, door speakers is if you're running them full range, you're limiting yourself on the volume. When you run the crossover to take the frequencies out of the speaker that speaker is not good at, then it frees up that speaker to run at a higher volume level while maintaining clarity, which is the really important thing you need to get that, that nice, clear, high volume experience so you can enjoy the thing on the highway in a convertible. So if you were doing this, I would recommend going ahead and, cutting the hole in the door card to get a nice set of separates. And like I said, I'm not going to tell you what brand to get because so many brands are making good ones. But it's going to give you a better crossover experience. So for example, with these, I have to set my crossover about one step higher than I would like to keep these from, starting to fart out a little bit when, if I'm playing hip hop or something like that. And if I were to have that separate, I would have had a better quality speaker down here that didn't have a big hole in the middle, and I probably could have dropped that crossover point down just a little bit. Same thing in the headrest speakers, you cross over these as well because these are tiny little speakers. Let's look at them. The factory speakers in here are just absolute junk. What I replace them with this is kind of a temporary solution that works, is some little Pioneer, I think these are 2.5-inch speakers, and they actually just plop right in the foam. I will say that I do have a project in mind that we haven't set up yet, and the project is to actually model and 3D print some backing pieces for these to seal these guys in. I mean, they're not going anywhere once you zip this thing up, but I think acoustically it would be a superior situation if I could 3D print something to fit in here. Interested in doing that, just hasn't been a high priority on the project yet. But with that, you just drop these in here and you can still get just a little bit of extra volume right next to your head with a good quality speaker that gives you a more immersive experience. So that covers kind of what you're seeing up here in the cabin. Now, arguably, at least in my perspective, the most important thing is that you need to have a low range speaker. You need some sort of a subwoofer to fill out what you're seeing, hearing, and most importantly, feeling in the car. Because to me, audio and music has a couple different aspects to it. It has the aspect of, your volume, your decibels, your thing that you can measure, but there's also an aspect of how it feels based on the amount of air that the speakers can push. And when you have a subwoofer, you've all experienced it, and you can feel that push. It gives a more, a three-dimensional immersive feeling to the experience, which to me is really important. So absolutely has to have a subwoofer. And then also you can take those low ranges out of these speakers so that they can be the most efficient that they can. So when I looked around, there are a ton of options with subwoofers. However, most of them obviously are going to require their own amplifier. And these cars don't have the space like we were talking about, the space for the amplifier I have in here for what's going on with the car. There are a few companies that are making subwoofers with built-in amplifiers. They're just all part of the box. And so I started looking at those. And I found there was only 2 companies that were making them with a proper, MDF, so wood enclosure. One was JL Audio and one was Rockford Fosgate. The JL was like 3 times the price. And so I went with this little Rockford Fosgate 8-inch speaker, which another thing about speakers is they're proportional to the space that they're in. So you don't need a 12 or a 15-inch speaker in a tiny little space. In the space the size of the Miata, this little 8-inch speaker, let me get this out here, actually works really, really well. Especially because you have these hollow cavities that are going on the sides here from the trunk up into the passenger compartment. When the trunk is closed, those are like ports, and it just pumps those low range frequencies right up into the cabin. So this particular little Rockford Fosgate 8-inch has the amp built in, so I didn't need any more footprint. It fits down here in the footwell. It's fairly flush with the depth of the footwell so that, I can still put luggage in here. I can still put, things that I need to put in my trunk. I still have plenty of room. So I have a significantly improved sonic experience without really much of a hit to the space in the trunk. And I got something that was made out of wood and not made out of plastic because, in my opinion, there's just better resonance than when you're trying to put a subwoofer in a plastic enclosure. There is some question about, some people do make spare tire subwoofers where they kind of take out the spare tire and they happen to fit in that space. I did look into those, and based on the available space that we have in here, vertically, they just don't fit. So I didn't go with one of those. So, looking at this holistically, you've got, a deck that suits your needs. Go with, just some decent separates for the door, something decent in the headrest if you have it. Just an inexpensive, like that. I think that amplifier was like $100, not that expensive. I think the subwoofer was maybe is the most expensive part. The whole thing, amp and everything, I think it was like $250 or something like that. So you can put together a pretty nice system for, under $1,000, which, compared to the stuff I was doing 20 years ago is really unheard of. It's just gotten a lot more affordable. So, but how does it sound? Well, I know you can't necessarily hear. We'll go ahead and play something on here so you can hear it, but not that it's going to transfer, but trust me, I showed this to customers when they were here at summer camp, and to other people. I love just taking people for a ride and showing them. I mean, it bumps. It just has this really solid feeling to the sound, and also it doesn't rattle. Another thing that I will recommend, and this is something that Flyin Miata sells, is we have like a. What's the name brand, Kian, of the insulation that we sell? DEI. DEI. So we've got like a DEI stick-on insulation. And you can put it in your trunk, you can put it in your doors, which I have done. And that insulation helps to damp things. It helps to keep things from rattling. When you have a nicer audio system, it helps to keep things more focused so that it just really sounds good without having shakes and rattles and reverberations and funny sounds and things of that nature. So that's it in a nutshell. Let's see if I can answer some questions here, and then we'll turn it on just so you can hear it as best you can. Some speakers that came, or sorry, speakers. Some questions that came in. Why won't my seat speakers work with my new head unit? I don't know about that because seat speakers work with the head unit. I will say, when I did research this, over the years, there were a couple different wiring configurations coming out of the seats going to the head unit. In this particular car, we have left-right stereo per seat. I've heard of other cars that just had left stereo in that seat and right stereo in this seat, or some other weird combination of the wiring. But moral of the story is you may have to beep out your wiring and figure out what wiring setup you have for left-right per headrest speaker, because you may be in a situation where maybe it's just wired up incorrectly. Because there's no other reason why when you plug these in, that, whatever head unit or speaker or amplifier you have shouldn't be able to power them. It's nothing weird about it. We did get a question about the NC Bose and Apple CarPlay. I personally don't have any experience with the NC stereo systems and with the CarPlay. However, Mike in our customer support department does. He has a nice system in his 2013 NC Club. So I would recommend, if you have questions about that, you can always reach out to support@flyinmiata.com and ask Mike and see what he has to say about that. Does the brand matter? Like I said, as long as you're not getting no-name stuff off of eBay or whatever, if you go to some place like Crutchfield, pretty much everything they have on there, go to your price point, you're probably going to get what you pay for. But even the inexpensive stuff is really sounding pretty good these days. So, of course, you can spend a lot of money on it if you want to. You just have to ask yourself, in a convertible, do you really want to put a bunch of money into something like that when all it takes is a razor blade to get into it? So, is it better to have good speakers or lots of speakers? Well, in my opinion, it's most important to have good amplification. Now, I would get away from the stock speakers in any case, but with any decent aftermarket speaker, generally speaking, I'm of the opinion that more speakers is better. Also in the guitar world, for example, if I have one 12-inch speaker versus four 12-inch speakers versus 8 12-inch speakers, even if I'm playing at the same decibel level for each setup, at any given decibel level, as you add more speakers, it's just a more three-dimensional immersive experience. There's more air that's being pushed, and you've got more headroom. The amplifier doesn't have to work as hard to get you where you're going, so it just sounds better. So if the choice is between more speakers, which I don't know where you're going to put them, and better quality speakers, I'd probably go with, as long as they're adequate quality, I'd go with more. So I don't know if that helps. Will an aftermarket stereo affect the resale value of your car? Hopefully, if you do a good job, it should increase the resale value, I would hope. And you do a professional installation, take all the things out so that you can cleanly route your wiring, clean up your ground points. You can see in here all the wiring is super well tucked and hidden and loomed, and it's trying to make it so it's as least obvious as possible that there's a system in this car. So if you do a really nice professional job and it sounds good, hopefully it'll increase your resale value. Let's see. That's really it. Hey, Kian, do we have any questions that are coming in live?
I do, yeah. To back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Headroom. What do you mean by headroom?
Okay, what do I mean by headroom? Headroom is kind of a function of amplifier power in a way. So basically, think of it this way. How much volume and how can you push while maintaining a clean signal? So for example, think of guitar amplifiers. Think of an old Marshall. The more you turn it up, it starts to distort. In the guitar world, you actually can get a pleasing distortion because you're overdriving the amplifier. In the audio world, distortion bad. You want to have a clear signal so that everything comes through how it's intended, so you can hear it well. So as you increase your amplifier wattage, what you're doing is you're giving yourself the ability to play at a higher volume while maintaining clarity, versus if you're just trying to run straight off the head unit with no amplifier, you can maybe get to similar volumes, but it's going to be distorted and sound like junk. And so having the power of that amplifier is how you're going to get to a clear volume level that's going to be nice for when you're driving on the highway, where you've got all this other ambient road noise, et cetera, to be able to overcome that so you can still hear it. So does that make sense? Okay, next.
What is the purpose of a tweeter?
So what is the purpose of a tweeter? So speakers are, just if you look at a speaker, they come in all different diameters, and there's a lot of engineering that goes into it, but long story short, different diameters of speaker are designed to be optimized to output different wavelengths, different frequencies, right? And so generally speaking, the larger diameter your speaker, the more it's going to be optimized for putting out low range frequencies, and the smaller your speaker, the more it's going to be optimized for putting out high range frequencies. So, a low range is maybe a bass speaker or a subwoofer, whatever you want to call it. Your average mid-range speakers are going to be, from probably like 4 to 8 inch in diameter, whereas your subs are going to be from like 8 to 15 inch in diameter. Your tweeters are your really small speakers that put out the really high frequencies. So, if you just have one speaker that's trying to output all the frequencies, obviously it's like an all-season tire. It's not going to do a very good job at any of them because it just physically can't do it. So when you have these separate diameter speakers, you can put crossovers in, and the crossovers say, okay, we've got a full range audio output, and what the system is going to do is it's going to take this low range chunk, and we're going to send this to the subwoofer. We're going to take this mid-range chunk, send it to the mid speaker. We're going to take this upper range chunk, send it to the tweeter. And so that way, between all the speakers, you're getting all the frequencies by correctly setting up those crossovers, and also allowing each speaker to do its job to the best of its ability, which also helps to give you that clarity and that headroom. Because, if I've got a 6-inch speaker, I'm trying to do full range, I can maybe get this much volume before it distorts. But if I have a 6-inch speaker where I'm only trying to do the optimal range for that speaker, then I can maybe get this much volume out of it before it starts to distort. So, long-winded answer of like a holistic answer explaining, what a tweeter is. So it's long story short, it's the highest range of frequencies that you're going to have in a full spectrum audiophile. So.
Our last question wants to know if your subwoofer has rattled any bolts loose.
My subwoofer has actually not rattled any bolts loose. I'm not surprised because the mechanics at Mazda are awesome and they torque their things. And it does bump pretty hard. But no, it's been great. I've had this system in here for a couple years now. I play it loud and it has caused zero issues, honestly. So yeah. So so let me go ahead and turn it on. I've got a CD in here now. We'll jam up a song and just, you're not gonna be able to hear it, but just so you can kind of see, and maybe we can get a reaction from Kian. We can turn this into a reaction video, right? So let's see what we got here. Interesting to note, if you open the trunk while it's going, the sub-frequencies just disappear. So, having that trunk closed keeps that a sealed box with these ports on the side, which really fire it up. So, Kian, you want to come have a seat?
Sure, let's do it.
There's lots of fun stuff we can play on here, but we don't want to get a YouTube copyright claim by playing other people's music. So we're just going to jam a thrash song from my metal band and see how it sounds. Kick it over to the CD. See what track we're on here. So normally your stock head unit would start to distort about right here, volume-wise, whereas this, well, let's get it going.
That is loud. That is loud.
So you can see, like, that's far more volume, and that's about the point where it will start to distort on this particular system if it gets any louder. So what would you say, Kian? How would you compare that volume-wise to what you would expect?
Sure. I put a sub in my CRV last year, and this blows it out of the water. It's a 12-inch.
Yeah.
Not even close. So very impressive.
Yeah. And would you say, if you're on the highway with the top up, like, how do you think that volume would be compared to road noise?
I don't think you'd hear any road noise. I didn't hear anything. I didn't know if you were talking to me.
Yeah.
Only music. Very clear, very loud.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And that's the thing. To me, having the horsepower, I love horsepower in all forms. To get that clarity at high volume is super important. Because I think also from a tinnitus perspective, when you start to get distortion and other things like that, I'm kind of sensitive to tinnitus. I've been playing loud music my whole life. That really starts to hurt it. But I can take fairly high volume things when it's really clear, if that makes sense. So.
Who is this?
This is me. Yeah.
This
This is my thrash metal band called Titan, like Tighten Your Fist. So we're just a local band, but we're not going to get flagged by YouTube. Actually, we will from my account. So, so anyway, yeah, I think we kind of covered all the things that we wanted to talk about. Again, if you enjoy this kind of thing, this is a little off topic for Flyin Miata, but it's still fun, and still, to us, performance in general is a big deal. Whether that's suspension, brake, horsepower performance, and to me, audio performance is a really big deal. So, we thought this would be a fun thing to talk about, and just to, show, that we really care about, all things relating to Miata performance. So if you enjoy this, please like and subscribe so we can give you more content. And thanks for joining. If you have any more questions, please shoot them over to the support at Flyin Miata, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. All right, have a good day.